Hello, hello. Welcome back to Copic in the Craft Room. Michelle Houghton here. We are tackling another simple image today. We have had an overwhelming request for some basic blending and some simple images. One of my favorite stamp designers that does some really simple images are my favorite things. This is the Pure Innocence line, and I know we've done a couple of hers already, but I think it shows a great simple coloring tutorial. So we're gonna keep things really simple again. We're using basic blending groups, so no fancy tricks. We're gonna do some basic hair techniques with flicking, smooth blending on the skin and the clothing. And today I'll add a little bit of a background in on this image as well with some sky and just a little bit of ground underneath, or at least a shadow. So I won't fill in that entire background, but I'm gonna give her a little bit of a halo so that she looks a little more finished. So I will speed us up. I will make sure to list colors as I am using them and to talk you through it as well. So I'm starting with her skin in an E000, just filling it in, getting a nice even coating. I'm keeping it simple, so I'm only using a couple colors, so I do want that base coat to be nice and thick. I'm going to double check here in a second on the back of my paper to see if there's a good saturation, that I've got it all even. And I'm coming in with an E01. So you can probably see right from the start where my light source is. It's coming in from the upper left corner. So I'm getting the bottom edge of her arm, the left edge of both legs, getting a little kneecap in there. Then coming back in with E000 to soften that. I'm using some small circular strokes and flicks to even that coloring out. Blend them together. E93 is going to be some cheek color. And then I'm going to blend those back in, and notice on the left I use an E000 to soften, and then on the right I use that E01. So make sure when you're softening those cheeks to use the color that it's sitting on top of. That will be important. Zoom in a little bit so you can get a little bit better view. Then I'm going to start with a W5 on her hair. And I am going to base the hair. A lot of times with black hair I'll leave a white highlight, but this time I am not. But I'm going to come in, fill those little pigtails in, and give it a good base coat as well. And then W7 is my second color. Now I'm going to flick this in, and I'm starting from the part and working outward, and then the bottom edge and flicking up. I'm also going to flick from both ends on each little pigtail or ponytail. Just a few on those ponytails. It doesn't take much. They're pretty small. And W9 is what I'm going to finish with. Now I'm working all the way up on the tip of my marker. So these lines are pretty small and tight, but I'm going to flick one or two just little flicks in from both sides and all of those areas, but very small amounts. W5, I'm going to soften just a little bit. I'm going to go back in and just one time brush over those areas with my W5 to kind of soften the flicks. And then I did get a little bit on her skin, so I'm going back in with my E000 to push that color back into the hairline. Then I'm going to switch over to a V05. I'm using that on the little heart clip in her hair and on those little hair ties just for a touch of color. Y11 is going to be the base color on her dress. I'm going to use a natural blending group here. So again, I'm just filling the dress in, nice even coverage. You could check the back again at this point. This is another place where you'd want that nice even coverage. Y13, I'm going to flick in. You can see how I'm using kind of the side of my brush nib, and I'm flicking in from that right side where there'll be shadow. Her dress is really just a cone shape. Y17 is next. Again, working down that right edge, flicking across. Bottom edge of the shoes and those back heels. Little blending with Y13, kind of stepping backward through the colors when I want a nice smooth even coverage, and Y11 to finish. Y17, I'm going to add a cast shadow under her arm And then I am going to come back and actually add another cast shadow kind of under her chin with the Y17. That's going to give it kind of a crisp shadow. I don't do any blending on that. N1 is going to start a cast shadow on the ground where she's standing. So it comes out from her feet, and then it is going to flare outward where we start seeing her little dress or skirt. And I'm going to soften that outer edge so it's not quite so harsh. And then I'm going to stay with that colorless blender and start working my way up the page to do some sky around her. I'm going to explain this a little bit at the end, but this is not very realistic how I've handled the shadow and the sky on that right hand side, but I'll talk about that in a minute. So this is a B000, and I'm coming back in with my colorless blender again and softening that edge. So see, I work around with the colorless blender first, and then I flick, kind of color in around her, and then flick outward with the B000 onto that colorless blender, and it's going to make that transition or that fade into white go much easier. So again, back to the colorless blender, soften that edge. And I just take one chunk at a time because I can't keep that colorless blender nice and wet unless I do it kind of small amounts at a time. B000, working in against her a little bit more solid, flicking out onto the colorless blender area when I get there. And back in with the colorless blender to soften that edge one more time. I had to switch markers. My colorless blender was kind of out of ink, so I switched over to a different one that I have. I have a couple of my colorless blenders, so they work. I have them always full. W3, I'm going to add a little bit darker shade to that shadow as it's closer to her feet, so it's much more distinct. A lot of shadows will get darker as it's closer to the object. One simple little image all colored up. Again, I hope these are helpful. I'm really not doing anything super new and thrilling, but we've seen a real need for some basic blending. I will keep going on these. I'll find some other stamp artists to demonstrate on. The only thing that I'm going to add to this image for sure is I put the shadow off to the one side. Hopefully you could see the light coming in from my left this time. She's kind of facing the light, and so my shadow comes out and it widens where my guess is her skirt is going to widen that shadow, just like it would mimic, kind of imitate her. But obviously there needs to be some ground here as well. So I might pick a different color and go underneath that shadow, figure that out, because right now obviously the shadow is going into the sky and shadows would not appear on the sky. So I need to give her some sort of horizon line and ground that image. So if this is looking a little off to you, that is why. So I will go back and do that on my own. But that's the concept of the shadow. You could see the fading on the blue sky, and those are the more important concepts for today. So thank you for joining me once again. I hope you have a happy, colorful week.